Welcome to the Francis Clark Center's webinar series. Our broadcast will begin shortly. In addition to webinars, we also offer a robust selection of teaching resources on our website, claviercompanion.com. These resources include archives of all articles from our print publication, Piano Magazine, intermediate and advanced repertoire video series, one-on-one mentorship opportunities, and information about our in-person education opportunities such as NCKP The Piano Conference and summer intensives. Make sure to follow us on our social media platforms to get updates on all of these resources and more. As always, thank you for your loyal support of the Francis Clark Center and our many divisions. We are grateful to be in service to such an amazing and ever-growing group of educators and musicians. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the broadcast.
Hello and welcome to our broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Stella Sick. I am based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and just like the rest of you, I have been homebound for the past few days. I have been doing online teaching on and off in various different formats and across different distances since 2007. And right now I am working just like you are to retool my entire studio to go online as of tomorrow.
Good morning, everybody. I'm João Paulo Casarotti, and I'm talking to you from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I have been teaching online since 2010 when I moved from Philadelphia to Louisiana, and I had lots of students over there. I teach privately besides teaching at Southern University.
So today we are talking with you about teaching advanced students online. And first and foremost, that we discovered that teaching online, whether it's beginner students or more advanced students, in essence is still always the same thing. You will find that many teachers come up with very interesting ideas. And so over the last 10 days, both JP and I have been not only compiling our own experiences, but reading accounts of other people teaching and watching videos of other people teaching and researching new software and apps to come up with the best suggestions for you today. So in today's masterclass, well, our online conference, we will talk about several things. We will cover, hopefully very briefly, real-time instruction and the time-shifted instruction, and just kind of nuts and bolts that you will need to make this work for you. We will talk a little bit about combining the real-time and the time-shifted models, because we think this is the most powerful way to use the technology when you're working with the more advanced students, and we'll talk about why. We will focus on the pedagogy of teaching online. And this is applicable not only to people who teach advanced students and for kids who are playing more difficult repertoire, but just about for anybody. It also works for people who are younger and closer to the beginning stages of their learning piano. So we think those things are applicable across the board. And if there's any time left, we'll talk about kind of expanding your vocabulary and how you communicate with your students and being able to connect one-to-many or hosting recitals online and bringing all of the students in. And of course, we'll leave as much time as possible for questions, because I'm sure you have many, and we'll be happy to answer as time permits. So one of the first things that you will discover, there's three things that you will need. But before we do this, JP came up with an excellent video that he's sharing with his students, how to get prepared to go online and still get the best experience in piano teaching. So JP, Allison, can we do the video?
The video number 1. Hello, my name is João Paulo Casarotti, and I would like to talk to you about what are the basic setup for online piano lessons. First of all, you need a high-speed internet. I recommend that you have at least 10 megabytes per second for download and 5 megabytes per second for upload. You can test your speed by typing on your web browser www.speedtest.net or by downloading the app Speedtest on your mobile device. Second, you need to have an account on one of the communication platforms as following: Skype, Zoom, FaceTime if you're using Apple products, Google Hangouts, Facebook Messenger, or even WhatsApp. Third, let's talk about equipment. You probably have at home a laptop, a tablet, such as the iPad, or a cell phone. You may also have at home a speaker that you can use for a better quality sound. Let's now talk about where to place your equipment around the piano. First of all, you notice that I'm using my sound system on the opposite side as my computer. You also notice that I'm using a stand to place my computer. I recommend, if it's possible, to have your device, the camera of the device, a little bit higher of the keyboard. In that way, you can capture the head, the neck, the torso, and also both hands and the entire keyboard. When using an iPad, you may need an iPad stand. Notice I have this one, and I'm going to put that on the top of my music stand. Notice that I have my speaker on the right side, and I will be having my iPad on the left side. So that way I can see the entire keyboard, I can see both of my hands, I can see my neck, my head, my torso. If you don't have available a laptop or a tablet, you can totally use your phone. Notice that I have placed my music stand, and on the top of the music stand I added the selfie stick with my iPhone. I also have my speaker on the right side as the other setups that I show you. So this is a good way of preventing the sound of the microphone to capture the speaker. Thank you for watching this video.
That's great, Alison.
Was meaningful.
So as JP was saying, there's three main components to make online instructions work. Of course, the first one is the internet. The internet is essential in making sure that you can connect to the world outside your home. There's also the hardware, and when we talk about hardware, we're talking anything that can transmit a signal, like a phone, a tablet, a computer. Any of those devices will work, and especially if you have something that was purchased in the last 2 years, you'll be in good shape. And of course, there's a software and app, and just like the video was mentioning, there's a series of different video conferencing softwares that will enable you to connect to your students.
Here are some examples of additional and helpful devices that will enhance learning experience for your students. You will see, please pass on the next picture, Alison, please. Thank you. You have USB condenser mics. I strongly recommend condensed mics because for online lessons, you need a good sound, and you also need a sound that captures the entire room, and so you can hear both the instrument and your voice. It's also important to be using webcams. They offer better quality in video, and they're more flexible regarding angles. You notice on the top right side, I have like an example of a projector. And I find that it's much better nowadays to use a projector than a TV because they have strong definition, really high definition. And some of them actually come with good speakers. You have that example in there with the Nebula 2. And they also offer portability. You can project them on the room, and it's incredible quality. I have a PDF document that will be attached on this presentation's handout, as well as the Francis Clark website that you register, that contains lots of information and resources and a list of equipments and accessories that you may want to consider looking to.
The most important component of the connection is the actual internet connection, and we cannot overemphasize the importance of it because it will affect every aspect of your online teaching. If you have a wireless internet connection, there's a few things you can you can do to make it better. One of them is make sure that the device that you're using for the online lessons does not have anything open, because there's things could be accessing the internet on the background without you actively having this application open. If you have children in the household, as many of us do, ask them not to use anything that takes a lot of bandwidth, like gaming is not good, watching Netflix video is not good during the time of your teaching, because it will affect the quality of the video, but more importantly, the audio. My personal recommendation, whenever possible, whenever you can figure out your setting, to make sure that you connect with a wired Ethernet cord. Of course, I understand that some people do not have that option and can only have phone or tablet to use it for. But if you have a computer, it is definitely worth the extra inconvenience of having the bulky computer using as your device to physically to be able to connect to the internet. And I think you will feel the difference. The one thing that you have to remember when you're tweaking your settings, you don't have a whole lot of a control of what's happening in your student's house. You can make recommendations, but at the same time, there's things that you can do to make your teaching come across better. And there's some things that the parents and the students can do on their end, and I would definitely spend some time communicating with them that. We will have, in our handouts, we'll have some suggestions in there as well. We'll have like a top 10 troubleshooting list that may be applicable to both you and your students.
Here are some of the lists of softwares and apps that you can be using to connect to the internet. The Google Hangouts was actually discontinued in 2019 and has been substituted by the Hangout Meets and Hangouts Chats. You can use the FaceTime Messenger, for example, as well, is a great way, since a lot of the kids have Facebook. Popular in Europe, in South America, in Asia, not so much in Asia because they can't use actually, is the WhatsApp. And it's easier to share content desktop version as well. There's also a desktop version. And the video communication platform is also possible. A lot of the kids have WhatsApp in these countries, and I have been using, and it's really resourceful because it offers a lot of ways of communicating. You can also use the FaceTime, but it's available only for Apple products. And definitely the quality of the video and the audio is better because they're using the same products brand. But there are some issues that on the FaceTime that you cannot share your screen. So if you need better options, there are better options for that, such as Skype and the Zoom. I particularly have been using Skype for the past 10 years. And just this week, I am starting to use Zoom, and I'm amazed with the other options that you have. And Stella is going to talk a little bit about Zoom. Now, Skype is great because it's really reliable. Most people have a Skype account, and you can also share your screen. You can use a different app to share your iPad screen if you need to do some annotations on score. And it's also a possibility of recording. You can record the session, and the video will be available for a month on the chat of Skype. You can also chat and put the assignments, send notes, send links to the students. And so Skype is really useful, but I think Zoom is a step up now.
So it seems like Zoom is our next favorite. I wouldn't say it's a replacement for Skype, but it's definitely a big contender. So on the negative side of Zoom, and I'll throw it out there right away, it is more complicated to use. So if you've never used the video conferencing software, starting there is a little bit daunting. But again, in my opinion, if you spend a little bit of time and invest some time to understand how it works, it's really, really worth it. So what you're looking at right now on the slide is the picture of my video room, and I put it in quotation marks. It's my meeting space. So some of the things that are available to you. So on the bottom left corner, you'll have the very easily accessible controls for your audio and for your video. It's especially helpful if you're using more than one video camera, and it's especially helpful if you have multiple audio sources as well. Very easy to switch. The part that's really, really great for me is this middle green button on the bottom of the screen that says share. When it says share, you can share a variety of different things that are available on your casting device. So for example, if you're on iPad, you can share Fourscore, or you can share a PDF of the score, or you can share a whiteboard on which you can physically write instructions to students as you go along. You can share any kind of application that is open. Let's say you have on a computer and you have something like a virtual Blackboard available. You can share that part as well. If you want to dig into more advanced features, there's a very, very cool feature called Turn on Your Original Sound. And you can see it in the upper left corner. There's a little tiny thing that says turn on the original sound. And this is just a few slides of what you would have to do it. Again, try not to stress over it. In our handout, there is a link to a very detailed document that tells you exactly how to turn this feature on. So if you look at it, I'm just going to focus over here. So there's a couple of steps that you will have to go through, but what it will allow you to do is during the session, it will allow you to turn the ability of your of Zoom not to compress the audio. So the audio is the one thing that most people find challenging when teaching online, and especially if you're teaching older kids. I apologize, my video is being very, very weird because my light sources keeps changing. So I think this is better now. You have to remember that all of these video conferencing softwares were created for business, which means that they're created for the voice. And they're not as well suited for transmitting the music, which means that the upper frequencies and the lower frequencies don't work as well. It's especially challenging for people who teach voice and teach like sopranos. That's very difficult to do. Or lower sounding instruments are actually better that way. It's kind of interesting. Then again, totally recommend this particular software. Now, as we talk about the sound, we talk about the internet connection. When we are working with students, very frequently internet connection or their poor microphone will prevent us from hearing very good sound. Interestingly, if the recording on the same device, like let's say they're using the phone for the lesson, but if they record on the phone and send the video to you to listen to, the audio quality is significantly better. So we recommend, as part of your repertoire, especially when you're teaching people who can play already, and you have to work on things like timing and the sound and the pedaling and colors, is to add this asynchronous portion. And so what you do, there's the first variant, is when a student goes and records the lesson beforehand and shares with you. And JP, do you want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Usually, these adding pre-recorded videos, they add a lot of teachers have been using this. It becomes relevant because sometimes the internet connection, there's some issues with the internet connections and the videos. If the recording is made at bare front, the teacher can watch the videos in the beginning of a lesson, so they are not taking up extra time in the lesson. In the variant 2, you can notice that it can be used internet connection is consistent, not good. In this model, students record a piece, teacher listens and responds either with another video where teachers talks and demonstrate, or teachers write comments on performance. That can be shared with Google Docs or also with on the chat. Videos are shared as unlisted on YouTube or on a cloud system such as Dropbox and Google Drive. These videos are very low production effort and ideally take no extra time on the part of the student. If you're using WhatsApp, videos can be shared directly from recording device. And you see on the variant 3, I use a lot of this. I usually recommend my students to share passages with questions or to check if they are practicing properly. I usually ask them to send short passages, and they, in that way, it's good for us to also, make extra money. We can actually add that on your student policy, that we would be happy to take some videos during the week and some questions for an extra fee. It's a great way to make a little more money and to help students to practice properly during the week if they have any questions.
Correct. So where were we? Another side of the asynchronous instruction, and this is not something that we're going to get into because we are not the most for the constraints of time, but also because they have a slightly different purpose. So all of these recommendations of asynchronous video recordings is something that you do on the fly, and as JP was saying, has very low production value. So you spend very little time creating it. On the other hand, if you have free time, I'm laughing at this one because I had no free time with this whole thing. You can create videos that can last for more than just one student. And this is going to be you creating videos that cover concepts that students can watch outside of the lesson. So let's say you're working on technique or you're working on a specific piece and you can show a specific way to practice it. You can create a video that's very beautiful and can be used by multiple people. Rather than us talking about it, we point your attention to Mario Ajero's webinar that's going to be hosted by Francis Clark, I believe, on April 1st. And Allison can correct me if I'm wrong. Mario Ajero also has a lot of different videos on how to do these things available on YouTube. So if you don't know anything about Mario, now is the time to find out. He's definitely the pioneer and an expert on how to create videos that will enhance your teaching overall. So what are the pedagogical considerations of teaching advanced students online? So we will cover a couple of things that we deal with every day. So one of them is a couple of suggestions of how to communicate better online. The question that always comes up is how do you mark up the score if you're into different locations, and how do you coordinate the score if you have one score and they have something different? How to keep assignments organized? What do you do if you cannot sing or count along with the students? And some of kind of quirky ideas for visual reinforcement that we sometimes take for granted, but we have both. I think we have advantage in being able to use the technology in some of these visual reinforcement parts.
When teaching online, the teacher must be able to demonstrate the concepts in front of the camera for visual and verbally describe exactly what you want them to do. I'd like to show a little sample of online lessons where you can see my studio, and you can also see a little bit how it works when describing and when you are demonstrating live on the lesson. Allison, can you please put video number 2? Yes, aí vai direita. Isso, e continua. Parararirará. Isso. Isso. Já tá entendendo. Agora, mais uma vez para mim do começo. Do começo agora usando as duas vozes, as duas mãos. From the beginning with 2 hands. Ok, mas ó, eu should ouvir. Until there. Remember, I hear. I'm not listening to the end. I should hear through the whole thing. Right? To the left one. Try to get the left in. Yes, now together, please. Ah, really beautiful, really beautiful. But try Yeah, I'm not sure if the video actually came with the passage that I want to demonstrate, because the audio was not synchronized with the video.
Can we get the slides back up? Thank you. So, so some of the best practices in teaching online, and this is again works for everybody. I personally find that I am a better and more effective teacher when I am in this format, because I have to choose my words much more carefully, and I have to form the concepts in my head before I can give them to the students. So I think this format makes us listen and talk slower and better, if you ask me. So you will not be able to have this back and forth interactions, and some of my students are very cheeky, so you have to kind of change your mode. So you speak, they listen, they speak, you listen. For the most part, I find it very, very much better than being a chit chat. I think it leaves us with a deeper understanding of what we're trying to talk about. You can also, there's a different way you model online as well, and JP can talk a little bit about it as well. Let's see. So how, we'll talk a little bit about modeling later on, but how do we handle scores? So
yeah, during the online lesson, it's important that both the student and the instructor use the same score. I usually recommend my students to add measure numbers for the score that does not have them, scan the score using an app from their phone, save on a PDF file, and send it to me prior to the lesson by email or WhatsApp. Every online student that I teach have a folder, a set list on my iPad's Fourscore app with all their music organized. I find this really beneficial because I can keep all their scores and annotations. Usually at the end of the lesson, I share the notes of the lesson by emailing them directly through the app. This is also helpful when working on the same piece with different students, since all the fingering is already present. I usually share the screen of my iPad live during the lesson. If I need to point out some fingering or ask some specific questions about a passage. In case you do not have an iPad to annotate, you must be specific to the student, pointing out the measure numbers, the beat, and the student can write on his music.
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's ways that you can annotate the music and then share that annotation with the student through an app called Fourscore. I actually prefer for my students to write things in their own scores, and I do it even in the normal lessons anyway, because it fosters the sense of ownership for what they have to do. And I find that this is, first of all, it gives them something to do for the younger ones to, actually write something on the music, but also if they write it, they kind of own it. So they're more likely to do it in my experience. Keeping assignments. Actually, this format fosters us to keep assignments better, if you ask me. JP, how do you usually do that?
Yeah, online lessons offer different ways to store and share the assignments and notes for the lessons. For every student that I teach, I keep a file with lesson plans and assignments, usually on Google. I usually type or copy and paste from my lesson plans the students' assignments on the chat box of Skype or Zoom. That's good for them to keep the record and to be more specific of the work that they need to do. You can also send the assignments by email or create a Google Docs and share with your students.
Right. So if you're not into having a Google Doc and share documents and have that variety going on, you can do it a simple way of just putting everything in a Word document and then copying and pasting it to the student. Since we're already doing so much technology, writing by hand probably is not going to be as helpful. So if you type it either during the lesson or afterwards and share it with them, then both of you have a record of what happened in the lesson. That's very helpful. This is our favorite topic. So what do you do if you can't sing or count at the same time as your student plays? So we have a couple of ideas. JP, what do you do?
Yeah, when students have a hard time to do that, I usually recommend them to turn on a metronome or play the passage slower while they count loud. If the problem persists, sometimes the issue can possibly be the lack of coordination or the lack of proper movements on each hand. I usually suggest that the students tap the rhythm on each hand separately first while counting loud, or singing also the melody. Secondly, I ask the students to tap really slow both hands while counting loud in order to develop the proper coordination. And it's a great thing because sometimes you tell them, they look at you and say, well, I'm not paying to have a voice lesson, but singing is so important for our students. And I encourage you all to really put singing on all your lessons.
I totally agree with that. Even in a normal lesson environment when I'm there, I make my students count as long as they play. And I don't, in the lesson, I frequently don't let them play without counting, especially if they have kind of nebulous understanding of what rhythm is. And I find it very helpful. And now they have to do it. Again, if counting is difficult for them, we use the combination of counting and the metronome. It's just what it has to be. And I think on the long run, it's better for them pedagogically to be able to count and play at the same time or sing at the same time. And we can show them how to do it, and we can do it step by step. And you will find that it's actually going to be good on the long run pedagogically. So another thing we can do is a demonstration on the screen. And so you can get really sophisticated and use the share feature on apps like Skype or on Zoom, or you can go low tech like I usually do. I just flash things in front of the camera. Especially if the student is playing and you try for them to make a crescendo, but they're forgetting. So I have a flashcard to remind them that they have to do crescendo or diminuendo. I can't remember which way it's pointing. And so if they have a screen in front of them, they'll be able to see it and react to it pretty quickly. So one of the problems of speaking when they play, again, because we're dealing with video conferencing software that's doing the smart calculations on the background and canceling voice from one another, so there is no loop. So if they play and you start talking, the sound that's coming from them will be interrupted. And we want to avoid it. We want to be able to hear the whole thing and still communicate with them. So visual cues, sometimes I dance in front of the cameras. It's not pretty, but it works. And I definitely use my flashcards. Another thing that I find helpful with younger students is having a dry erase board that you can, again, very low tech, you can just write it and they're going to be able to follow it relatively easily. Now, if you want to go a little bit more advanced and you have access to a digital keyboard that has MIDI out, you can get something like Classroom Maestro, which is a digital blackboard that allows you to show students notes, scales, chord progressions, and actually do theory in a very meaningful way. But this is something I recommend not getting into if you're just getting bearings on online teaching. There's lots of possibilities out there. Once you start becoming comfortable with some low-tech options like flashcards and maybe pre-made flashcards that you load up on your computer and you can flash them sharing the screen, you can add some other components that will enable you to do these things a little bit faster. Microphone, JP microphone.
Sorry, I would like to talk a little bit about the use of multiple cameras during the lessons. And this can bring great advantage to both the teachers and students. Considering the wellness aspect of piano playing, students are able to see movements on different angles for a better understanding. The picture on the left that you see on the screen shows an online masterclass of Sheila Page from the Keyboard Wellness Seminar. She was in Cherry Hill, and the student was participant of the Piracicaba International Piano Festival in Brazil. Ms. Page used the Vid Blaster software to display multiple cameras on the same screen. She also was able to select one specific camera at the time and zoom in and out as necessary using her zoom. The second picture on the right, it's from a student work on the Schumann Little Etude from the Alm of the Young. I request him to place one of his cameras on the floor as we were working on the sustain pedal. So I find this really helpful because, when in the lesson am I going to be going and looking on that angle? Sometimes the top camera is a great way to demonstrate as well. And so it's really good to have multiple cameras, and that can benefit the students to see in different angles that will be better suitable for the movements that they are using. Now, we're going to talk a little bit briefly about the other options of instruction. I have some great experience on online masterclass and studio classes at my university. In 2012, I developed the Southern University online studio. And it's totally possible to hold masterclass and studio classes. The picture on the left, you see a studio class that I taught online in 2013 from my studio at Southern University. I was actually traveling, and the students were on my office. A colleague opened the door, and they used my online studio. The picture on the right, it's an online masterclass of Sheila Page with the Southern University Piano Studio. That was in 2014. I did one internet connection with that, with Skype with her, as you see the screen with multiple screens. And I live stream on YouTube using a different device through Google Hangouts at that time, and share the link on Facebook. At that time, we had attendance from several countries, including Russia, Brazil, France, and Portugal. So it's a great initiative. And also, actually, all of our other students that couldn't fit in my office, they were on the library watching that from there. Now, you have this, I would like to show you a little video, but these pictures that you see are, you can see Neo Ahero, 9 years old, the son of Mario. For some of you that knows him, I think he's 17 now. They are from Texas, and he was working with me on a master class at the Piracicaba International Festival back in 2014. So Alison, if you can show for me a little bit of the master class, online master class on video 3.
How are you, Neo?
Good.
So these people that we have here, they are students of the Second Encontro Internacional de Pianistas de Piracicaba. We're in Brazil, in a little town, around 400,000 people. And we are in the music school here in Piracicaba, the city. And this is a school of a famous German composer that moved to Brazil in 1951, which will send you some of his compositions for you to play, if your dad allows, of course. So let's start. So you'll be playing for me the Bach Prelude in B flat major, Prelude in Fugue, right?
Right, yes.
So you can start whenever you're ready. Bravo. I think it may be good we work with the prelude first, and then we do the fugues. Does that okay?
Yeah.
So I keep my mind fresh.
It's okay,
Eu vou
Alison.
trabalhar primeiro com o prelúdio, depois a gente vai para fuga. Well, really good. I like a
You bring it back for me, the presentation. Great. One of the last things that we want to talk to you before the question and answers are how, specifically during this time, you may be wondering, how are we going to be doing recitals, be holding studio recitals during these pandemic times? I mean, the answer is kind of really simple, actually. Not that complicated, I would say. Online. In this picture, you see one of my studio recitals. I call this a hybrid recital. You see our Baton Rouge piano students and two of our online students. One lives in Portugal and the other one lives in Brazil. We made this possible by holding a Skype group call with the online students. On a separate computer, camera, and microphone, we live stream the recital worldwide. Not only the parents that attend the recital at the church were able to attend, but family members and friends of all of the students that were not able to attend the recital in Baton Rouge. So this is a great opportunity for you to try this out. And of course, you're not going to be able to hold these recitals live, presential, but you can do online now. So I would like to now, Shanna, Stella, do you have anything else to add before we go for questions?
So many of the technical tools that we've mentioned today can be used, like for example, for doing a masterclass where you connect many different students. Same tools that we are using for one-on-one instruction can be also applied for how to do lessons with multiple students or doing a masterclass or even doing a recitals. Skype allows you for more than 2 connections at a time. Actually, you can have up to 50 people online. Zoom allows you 40 minutes of multiple people connected to the same room, so you can do it that way. Anything. The thing is that it's very difficult in a space of an hour to tell you everything that there is to do. There's lots of different things out there that can be done with online instruction and connecting people to one another. Our suggestion in general is start simple. And then as the necessity arises, let's say you're interested in doing a recital, then you research the tools out there because there's more than one. That way you're not overwhelmed all at once. And in general, my suggestion is start simple and then start adding. Let's say you want to do a video and you want to have multiple angles, and so like, oh, this is really great. And so you start looking into what will allow you to do that, like getting an extra camera or being able to switch between the two. So that's my general recommendation. And I hope you're not overwhelmed and surviving through all of this, and your students will see value of it. Because actually, I think after everything is said and done, we will continue teaching differently, and I think we will keep incorporating some of these concepts that we are learning right now in our everyday teaching.
I strongly agree with Stella on this. And I mean, what you see here, my setup are from 10 years of experience teaching online. And of course, I have been building, I love my equipment and I keep buying all the time. But it's important that you use something that you feel comfortable at the beginning and be adding. And show confidence to your students. I know we're all freaking out now in how to do this, but it's important that you show confidence and you can still hold your lessons online. It's gonna be okay.
Yes, and another thing, if I can add, I've noticed, and I noticed it as well, and a lot of my friends say that they seem to be working harder when they're online, and it's very true, because we have to think differently, we have to think faster, we have to be so collected, and it's exhausting. I so understand you and I so relate to everything that's happening. But remember, you and what you have to offer to the students is so precious at this time, because they need a sense of normalcy. They need something to look forward to, and you are providing it for them. And I do hope that all of the parents see the value in it and don't interrupt lesson continuity just because of this little tiny bug. I really do hope so. So we're open for questions, and we can probably finish the slide. And Allison, if you want to back on and see if people want to ask us stuff.
Thank you, JP and Stella. This has been a wonderful presentation, and I think you've covered a lot of the questions that people have had. I'd like to just let everyone know that today's replay of this webinar will be available later today, along with the handout. I will send an email to everyone who has attended so that you have access to that right away. And then I will also post that to the claviercompanion.com COVID-19. That's our landing page for resources to help you in your online teaching during this time. So we'll turn now to some questions. I'd like to start with just a couple questions about Zoom. And a few people asked what you would recommend for your students to use. I guess this doesn't matter the format that you're using, whether it's Zoom or Skype, but would you recommend them to use a laptop or a tablet or a phone? What do you find to be the best?
If I can chime in, they have to. I recommend computer with a wired internet connection because it will offer the best internet connection, which will solve or mitigate some of the audio issues. However, they have to use whatever they have available.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I have been running my studio for, I would say, for the past 6 years without the wired connection. And the wireless also works really good. It's just you don't have that stability. Sometimes you have that variance. But I strongly recommend the computer. And I'm sure everybody has a computer or laptop. I think that's my first option. I try to demonstrate that on the video. The second option would be the iPad or the tablet, since the screen is a little bigger and has better sound. And I think it's the last resource, the iPhone or the cell phone. But you notice on my video that I enhance that with the speaker. Everybody has a little speaker at home, and you can totally use that, and we'll bring to the next level.
Thank you. While we're talking about devices, we've had several people ask about the multiple camera angles that you were able to get in your teaching. Could you speak about how you set that up with a particular platform and how you can get all those angles at once?
Yes. I have been using Skype, as I said, most of this time, and there are several ways you can do this. I prefer to do manually. There are some apps that you can put it on, or some softwares that can allow multiple cameras. I posted on the handout of this presentation. You have some resources in there on my other handout about it. But you can use VidBlaster, which used to be free for PC, and that you can add several screens at the same time. But it's an external thing from Skype. I personally like to use directly on Skype. So I have my camera set up. I put usually top camera, one on each side, and I put one on the paddle, as well as the front camera in the beginning of the lesson where a student can see my face. I usually have some USB extension cords around me too, because then it gives you more flexibility with the cameras. And I change manually on the settings. You may need also to have a hub plugged on the electricity, because sometimes these laptops have few entrances for USB. So you need to have an external hub, plug it all the USB that you need to, and connect with the electricity, so that way it can get the battery that's needs. And then I switch manually. In Skype is a little more labor to switch manually than Zoom. I found that Zoom is really quick to change. And as soon as you plug it in and they are connecting the electricity with this hub, the system will recognize. So you will see them there, and it will label differently each microphone or each camera if you're using more microphones as well. So you can actually switch manually. And that's what I have been doing, and it works totally fine. Usually if I work with students that don't have that much money to purchase, at least one camera I use for students that are having lessons regularly with me. I ask them to buy it gives another level of instructions if they have at least one camera and one microphone. And I think on this handout I have several different packages of equipment that can help you can be building from.
I will just add to that from my perspective. On Wednesday in Diana Dumoulin presentation, she suggested with Zoom a very easy way to add a multiple camera angles is by using your same link that you set up for the meeting. You can sign into it from 2 different devices. And so I've actually done that in my teaching, where I have one that's showing my hands on my phone, and then I have one on my laptop as well. And so that doesn't require as much switching back and forth if you just want a quick way to do that as well. Stella, did you have something to share?
No, there's some other questions that are flashing across the text, so I was just reacting to that.
So let's move on a little bit from the platform. You talked a lot about score sharing, and there were some questions about how we should mark our scores and how you can best see students fingering, and whether or not you want your students annotating their scores digitally on what you've shared with them, or if they should put that in their paper copy that they have at home.
I can start there, and then JP can continue. For somebody who's been doing technology so long, I am remarkably low tech. I prefer for my students to take a snapshot of their score in the beginning of the lesson, and I can reference it just to see what's in their score. And if I mark my score, I can send a picture of my score with my markings, and I can copy them over. I know it doesn't sound very advanced or anything like this, but when you're dealing with a very quick changeover, sometimes I don't have time to set up and share the scores beforehand. I am also not an Apple user, so I don't use Fourscore. Fourscore is wonderful, by the way. And if my students and I had Fourscore available, then you can share the layers, and that's easy. But I find a lot of use in just manually marking up the score and for them to take a picture and send it to me so I have something to look at.
Yeah, I think students all nowadays have their own cell phone, and I usually recommend them to have an app for scanner app. And then what they do, I ask them before they have to start a piece, they always have to write their fingerings and share that score with me by email. So they share exactly the same score. So I see their notes. And then as I'm also seeing the score live as they play. So I can compare if there's passages that makes really easy to change. I just pointed out the measures and I asked them to change, and I annotate it. And then at the lesson, I send the PDF with the notes. And usually I do different colors every lesson, so they can actually know which exactly lesson we did those changes. And it works smoothly if you ask them to send in advance. And I'm specific about it. Get the PDF, take the pictures, convert it to a PDF on the scanner, and send me one file, the PDF, with the title of the piece. That way, when I put it on my Fourscore and I just drag it into the folder, and it's stored there on there as the last score, because sometimes they do some changes. And the next week, if they change it, they send me always their latest score, so that I have it on my screen on my iPad.
Thank you. Both of you had mentioned some solutions for the challenges presented by singing or clapping and counting out loud throughout a lesson. And we had some questions about how to best utilize the metronome in online teaching. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I usually ask the students that's why we don't recommend the phone if they can use the other device, because the phone is, besides if there's some problems during the communication, we actually text the student, or we can send files using WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. But the way we do is I ask my students to have an app, a metronome app on their phone, and they have the phone already in front of them. So they just turn on that. There's tons of new apps for free for metronome, and they turn on the metronomes. I'm specific about what they need to put it in there, the tempo, slow, faster, and they put it in and they do with the metronome, and it works perfectly.
In general, that's one of my requirements when my student starts with me, is to get a metronome and get comfortable with it. And so before all of that has started, I made my students just walk to a metronome so that they can listen to it and do things according to the metronome. That may have prepared my students a little bit better, but doesn't mean that they can't do the same thing with you physically not being there. And so metronome is a worthwhile investment. And I'm specifically talking about a standalone microphone, not part of the phone, not a phone app. It's $30. That goes a really long way.
Thank you. We have a few more questions about the specific technology, and one is about headphones and whether or not you require your students to wear headphones, and then how you deal with headphones that have a built-in microphone, if that's useful, or if it's better to use the microphone from your device?
I don't require my students to use headphones. I use headphones right now because we don't want any loops in this environment. The headphones makes the sound more concentrated from your device, and you can hear better. Like I, as a teacher, can still hear my student better, and they will have the same thing, but it's not a requirement. If their speakers are decent enough, it should be good enough. The only other thing, if you do get headphones, it's not bad idea to get open headphones, which means that the sound from the outside also gets in, so you don't have to keep taking this on and off. But I would not spend a whole lot of money on headphones, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with that, because a lot of the time the students actually have really fancy headphones. It's a gadget that everybody has now, good ones. But the thing is that your student can hear themselves. And it's all about the sound. So I think it's important. It's better to put money on the good speaker if they don't have one than headphones, so that they can hear. And even myself, I never use the headphone because I want to hear my sound as I am on the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to hear yourself. So I prefer the speaker and making sure that the room is quiet. This is some requirements on every lesson online, because these microphones are so powerful. They capture everything,
Thank you. As we're talking about sound, a few people asked for some clarification on the Zoom settings you were talking about, Stella, and
Okay.
The auto compression, and whether or not the student also has to do that.
So in my research, every user has to turn this function on for themselves. So if I set it all up on my end, it doesn't mean that the people in my session will be able to have access to the same thing. So I think if I went through the steps and if my student went through their steps, they should be able to turn this function on and off. The one word of caution for those of you who are planning to explore it, it does take more bandwidth. So you have to make sure that you're on a strong internet connection to use it properly. It's, I don't know if I can, I think that answers the question.
Yes, it absolutely does. Thank you. We are nearing the end of our time here. Are there any other questions that either of you would like to address that you've seen pop up, or you'd like to make fun?
So there are a number of questions that I see flashing across the board for the online recitals. And I just mentioned a couple of things. There's many, many more. So normally when we talk about online recitals, before this whole thing happened, we talk about recitals that are streamed. So everybody gets together in one room and then we have one streaming thing going out there and everybody watches it. Fine. Now that everybody is in a different place, there's two immediate solutions. One of them is Skype. Skype allows for multiple people to be on the call at the same time. I think it's 50 people and it's free. The time limitation is not there. The rest of it all depends on where you place your camera and where you place your microphone and how strong your internet connection is. The other solution is Zoom. Now with Zoom, if you have a free version of Zoom, it will only allow you to connect to multiple people for 40 minutes and then it shuts down. In order to avoid that, you need to buy a pro version of it, and I think it's like $15 a month. If you don't want to invest the money, then just go with Skype.
Thank you. It has been so wonderful to have both of you on today. And as we wrap up, I'd like to ask both of you, what has been your most inspiring teaching moment over video?
Oh, that's a great question.
I have one just last week. And it's a simple little tiny thing. I have a kid who cannot sit still for 2 seconds at a time. He's 6 years old. He's very bright and he's all over the place. I was able to keep his attention for the entire 20 minutes of his little lesson just because I was showing things on the screen and he was able to do things around it. And I said, well, maybe for him, that's the way to go. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, I want to share two of them. One is related to what Stella said. When I moved from Philadelphia to Baton Rouge, I had a student that was completely hyper and in HD, and the parents were really rich, and they actually pay a trip for me to go to Philadelphia and set up the studio. And this kid was 8 years old at that time, and I still teach him actually. And he was able. The mom bought all the equipment that I said, and he actually set up himself. And I was just drinking wine with his parents, and the kid set up, and I tell you, he was so much better online than live, because he had that ownership. He set up the TV, the cameras, and it was a great experience for him and worked really well. The second one, it was yesterday when I have a live student here that never had online, and for the first time he had online lesson. And I tell you, it works so much better online for him as well, because he's really able to concentrate better, to follow direction. That ownership, I think it's amazing. Let me share one more because I have full of them. I have students that I teach from Brazil that I see them twice a year only when I go there for my festivals. And a lot of the times people say, well, online doesn't work because you don't feel the students. You need to feel, he needs to feel you. Sometimes you need to touch them. So when I get there, it's a great experience to hear them live and see that all the skills that we're working online are actually there. So it really works. And of course, I use the time when I'm with them there during my festival. I say, well, let me touch you a little more so that you can feel everything, since that's the only time we have like that. But it works really well when you describe and when you demonstrate, and students learn really, really solid.
Mm-hmm. I have just one thing to add. I full-heartedly and honestly believe that teaching in this format makes us better teachers. I really do. I think we choose words more carefully. I think we form our thoughts more carefully. I think, while I'm not enjoying any of the other stuff that's happening with this, I think we're gonna walk away from this better teachers. And I hope you feel the same way, and you can forgive things that don't work and embrace things that do and are better in this format.
I agree. I think we are going to improve a lot as a teachers with this experience. And I repeat this: please be confident, even if you're not. Show that to your students. That's going to be important for them during this time. It's actually hard for them. So if you show confidence with a basic setup, do the base setup until you get more. You get more equipment, new equipments, and try things. But it's really important that confident. I had a teacher yesterday saying me, should I charge less for an online lesson? And I say, no. It's actually more work for you now. You have to prepare more for the lesson. So value your work and show confidence to the student. They need you now.
Thank you both so much for a wonderfully inspiring webinar this morning. We appreciate your encouragement so much, and it's helpful for everyone across the world listening in today. That is all we have time for today. This replay will be available later this afternoon along with the handout, so stay tuned for that. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.